So today we're talking about why my personal film career took off once I learned how to operate the camera, to light, to do all the things that are involved in the practical side of filmmaking, as opposed to the things that are involved in the theoretical side of filmmaking, producing, directing, storytelling, screenwriting. That was the first decade and a half of my filmmaking journey. That's something I was really comfortable with, and I thought that's what my career would be. But I couldn't get past a certain level. I felt really stuck in waiting for money, raising money, waiting for other people to give me permission to make a film. And I couldn't make a film without their permission because I needed money to hire all of those technicians and hire all that equipment because I didn't know how to do it myself. Once I learned how to do it myself, things took off. Now, I don't regret the first 15 years of my film career by any means. I had really amazing experiences. I was able to create work that I'm really proud of. And to be honest, back when I was shooting commercials in like 2006, 2007, 2008, we were shooting mainly on 35mm film anyway. So it wasn't as if I could have just, taken $100,000 out of my bank account, gone and bought a camera, gone and bought film, paid for it to be developed. It was just too hard to learn back then in the pre-Arri Alexa, Canon, Cinema, Red ecosystem. To be a cinematographer back then, you needed to either go to film school or you work as 5-10 years as coming up through the camera department, and often both. That wasn't something that I wanted to do. I felt my job as a storyteller first and foremost was to come up with stories, write stories, work with actors. Up until 10 years ago, there was a big dichotomy between the technical side of filmmaking and the creative side of filmmaking. Once you could go out and buy a camera, once you had sub $10,000 really high quality cinema cameras, even in 1080 or 2K, that all changed. Because when you're shooting digital, you can see on the back of the camera what you're going to end up with on your computer and eventually on the cinema screen. You don't have to trust that you're correctly exposed, that the light meter is working, that the light won't change, that the lab's not going to mess up the print. You take away all of that risk. What you're left with is the ability to see what it is that you're going to get as a result. This takes out a lot of the guesswork. It also makes it much easier to learn because you can shoot, mess up, and then go straight back and shoot it properly again, or probably mess up in a different way, and speed up that virtuous cycle of getting better, or at least getting better at shooting what you want to shoot. In the pre-digital era, and even today, there were hundreds and thousands of filmmakers who have all these scripts, all these ideas, and can't raise the resources to bring them to life. Steven Soderbergh, when he started shooting his own films, I think it was on the Red 1, that was so unusual as to be newsworthy. Now, the films that Steven Soderbergh shot, they're not going to win any awards for cinematography, but they do win awards as great films, which I think says a lot. He's not trying to make the prettiest pictures, he's trying to tell the best story. And to do that, he feels like if he's the one in control of the camera and he's not constantly waiting for someone else to give their interpretation of what he's asked them to do, then he can move quicker, he can work with the actors better, he can set up his scenes better, he can tell the story better. The reality is that you don't need to know everything. You don't need to be a master of mic operation. You just need to know enough that you know what's good and bad. You don't need to be a master color grader. You just need to know enough to make your images look the way that you want them to look. You don't need to be a full-time film distributor, but if you want your film to be seen by the people that are going to enjoy it and going to fund your next film, you need to know enough about the process of film distribution so that you can find an audience for the films that you want to make. It wasn't until I started filming my own work that my work really started improving. I stopped waiting for other people to give me permission, or some guy with a camera who thought my script was worth their time. And I could go out and shoot stuff until now, edit it, grade it, get it seen on the internet, and build up a community, build up my skills so that now I can get the scripts I've written made. The core of what I wanted to share is not that you need to be good at everything and that you'll never make a great film until you understand the difference between 16-bit and 32-bit audio. It's just that learning more informs everything else. You know, when you're more comfortable with how films are made and how films are paid for and how films make money, that then informs the type of scripts you write, because you know what you can get made and you know the resources that you have access to, and you don't do what I did on my first few scripts and write, you know, intergalactic alien battles as though I had a, you know, Netflix deal for $200 million. You know, that script is never going to see the light of day. Whereas a film set in a very small contained space with compelling characters, as hard as that is to write, has a much better chance of being made. And it's only when you're making films and getting feedback, meaning you're making them and watching them and understanding what works and what doesn't work, that you're improving as a filmmaker. You're not improving as a filmmaker just sitting around hoping something gets made. I guess my main point is don't let fear of technology stop you from creating and learning about technology. Sometimes being more conscious of the constraints can help you rather than hurt you. The history of filmmaking is full of examples of filmmakers who were very successful in a small budget, small environment, and when they were given a huge canvas to create whatever they wanted, they then made something much less personal, much less artistic, much less satisfying, and much less popular. You could say that the success destroyed them, and if they had stuck to what they knew and what they were good at, their career would have continued on the same trajectory. It wasn't until I bought the 5D Mark II, then the Mark III, then finally the C200, and had the feedback of shooting and grading, editing, that constant sense of refining what I like to do, building up my own aesthetic, understanding how the constraints of the camera translated into the type of scene that I was going to shoot or wanted to shoot, that my career really took off. I was able to shoot whatever I wanted, whenever I wanted, and not wait for someone else's permission. I really think that the most important currency of filmmaking is no longer gear, but attention. It's who you can communicate to, who's interested in the stories that you want to tell. The only way to build that attention, to build that community, is by constantly putting out work, finding an audience for it, building an audience for it, taking in feedback, not necessarily what films other people want you to make, but whether or not you were able to fully realize that particular project's potential, and then adjusting accordingly. So often in filmmaking, you can feel like you have all these ideas and no way to make them real. It's much better to have one small idea fully realized and out in the world than it is to have 50 perfectly written scripts that you can't raise money to make. That is my 2 cents on filmmaking, where it is, and the process of picking up a camera and shooting your own films. Even if they're not perfect, even if you're a long way from what you would consider a professional cinematographer level, you can still make your films a reality in your style, and I think that's much more important. Thank you very much for watching. I will see you next time.